Emily Bronte was born on July 30th, 1818 in the village of Thornton, Yorkshire, in northern England to Maria Branwell and Patrick Bronte. She was the younger sister of Charlotte Bronte and the fifth of 6 children. In 1820, shortly after the birth of Emily's younger sister Anne, the family moved 8 miles away to Haworth, where Patrick was employed as a perpetual curate. Here the children developed their literary talents. Some of Emily's earliest known works involve a fictional world called Gondel, which she created with her sister Anne. Emily also wrote other poems as well. Her sister Charlotte discovered some of Emily's poems and sought to publish them along with her own work and some by Anne. The 3 sisters used male pen names for their collection, poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell. Published in 1846, the book only sold a few copies and garnered little attention. Again publishing as Ellis Bell, Bronte published her defining work, Wuthering Heights, in December 1847.
The story begins with the narrator, a man named Lockwood who rented a manor called Thrushcross Grange. While there he met his landlord, Heathcliff, a wealthy man who lived in the ancient manor of Wuthering Heights, which was 4 miles away from Thrushcross Grange. While at the Grange, Lockwood asked his housekeeper, Nellie Dean, to tell him the story of Heathcliff. Nellie relayed the story to him. It centers on 2 families, the Earnshaws and the Lintons, who lived in 2 separate manors, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Heathcliff, as a young boy, came to live with Catherine and her family in Wuthering Heights because the old Mr. Earnshaw, Catherine's father, took a liking to the orphan. The 2 as children became very close. But after old Mr. Earnshaw died, the family began to treat him like a servant. Hindley inherited the property and returned with a wife, Frances, and immediately began seeking revenge on Heathcliff.
Once an orphan, later a pampered and favored son, Heathcliff found himself treated as a common laborer, but despite that, Heathcliff continued his close relationship with Catherine. One day, when Catherine and Heathcliff were out exploring, they came across the Lintons at Thrushcross Grange. The Lintons had a son and a daughter, Edgar and Isabella, around the same age as Heathcliff and Catherine. Catherine was bitten by a dog and had to stay at the Grange for 5 weeks, but Heathcliff was sent back to Wuthering Heights. While there, Catherine was taught by Miss Linton to act like a proper lady. By the time Catherine returned to Wuthering Heights, she had become infatuated with Edgar, and her relationship with Heathcliff grew more complicated.
Remember Frances? Well, she died giving birth to her son, Hareton. Hindley, her husband, became very depressed and resorted to heavy drinking. With the alcoholism, he acted even more cruelly towards Heathcliff. During this time, Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship started getting weaker, and Catherine's desire for social advancement prompted her to marry Edgar Linton, despite the fact that her true love was Heathcliff. Soon after, Heathcliff ran away from Wuthering Heights, stayed away for 3 years, and returned shortly after Catherine and Edgar's marriage.
When Heathcliff returned, he immediately set about seeking revenge on all who had wronged him. While he was away, he acquired vast and mysterious wealth. With that, he deviously lended money to the drunken Hindley, knowing that Hindley would increase his debts and fall into deeper despondency. When Hindley died, Heathcliff inherited the manor. He also placed himself in line to inherit Thrushcross Grange by marrying Isabella Linton, whom he treated very cruelly. On the other side of town at the Grange, Catherine became very ill and gave birth to a daughter, also named Catherine. Soon after giving birth to her daughter, she died. Heathcliff begged her spirit to remain on earth. She could take whatever form she could, haunt him, drive him mad, just as long as she did not leave him alone. Shortly thereafter, Isabella fled to London and gave birth to Heathcliff's son Linton.
For the next 13 years, Nellie Dean stayed at Thrushcross Grange to raise young Catherine. Edgar and Nellie made sure that Catherine knew nothing of Wuthering Heights, or its master. But, like her mother, young Catherine was drawn to adventure, and wanted to explore the moors. She ended up at Wuthering Heights, where she meets Hindley's son, Hareton. Heathcliff's despicable treatment of the young man turned Hareton into a grunting, uneducated oaf. Still, Catherine was happy to have some companionship.
Remember that Isabella and Heathcliff were Linton's parents, and when Linton turned 7 years old, he went to go live with Heathcliff after a dramatic custody battle. 3 years later, Catherine met Heathcliff on the moors and made another visit to Wuthering Heights, where she met Linton. She and Linton started a secret romance conducted entirely through letters. When Nellie destroyed Catherine's collection of letters, Catherine began sneaking out at night to spend time with her young lover, who asked her to come back and nurse him back to health. However, it quickly became apparent that Linton was pursuing Catherine only because Heathcliff was forcing him to. Heathcliff hoped that if Catherine married Linton, his legal claim upon Thrushcross Grange and his revenge upon Edgar Linton would be complete. One day, as Edgar grew deathly ill, Heathcliff lured Nellie and Catherine back to Wuthering Heights and held them prisoner until Catherine married Linton. Soon after the marriage, Edgar died, and his death was quickly followed by the death of sickly Linton. Heathcliff now controlled both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. He forced Catherine to live at Wuthering Heights and act as a common servant, while he rented Thrushcross Grange to Lockwood. Remember, Lockwood was the character who introduced the story.
As Nellie completed her story, Lockwood's fascination with Heathcliff turned to disgust, and he gave notice to Heathcliff that he would leave Thrushcross Grange. 6 months later, however, he returned and visited Nellie, who gave him an update. Despite her initial rejection of Hareton, Catherine had warmed to him and began teaching him how to read. Heathcliff was too obsessed with the dead Catherine to even care about the younger generation, or even to bother eating or sleeping. Instead of continuing a cycle of abuse and revenge, he wandered into the moors and made broken-hearted appeals to Catherine's ghost. Heathcliff died shortly after in his oak-paneled bed.
Hareton and Catherine inherited the two houses. They planned to marry on New Year's Day and created a new atmosphere of renewal and hope. Lockwood left the happy lovers and passed by the gravestones of Catherine, Heathcliff, and Edgar. Heathcliff's grave plot was fresh and not yet covered with grass. And with that, the story was done.
At first, reviewers did not know what to make of Wuthering Heights. It was only after Bronte's death that the book developed its reputation as a literary masterwork.
Emily Bronte died of tuberculosis on December 19, 1848, almost a year after writing her novel.